A few people sent me this video, which is very misleading. It's misinformation. It's simply wrong. It's a journalist, Elon Gilad, who's talking about Torah and religion and simply doesn't know what he's talking about. And so I want to clarify what he's saying. And the reason why this is so unfortunate is because he's saying that the reason why we can't eat cheeseburgers is because there is a misunderstanding in what the Torah says. And really, he says, God forbid, that we should be able to eat cheeseburgers. I'm going to show you what he says, and I'm going to clarify some very important points and really fundamental points in understanding Torah and rabbinic law, both of them, a little bit of Hebrew as well, and inviting Elon Gilad to learn more about Judaism and how the Torah works, not just getting likes on TikTok and Instagram, so that he actually does not misinform people. It just isn't it isn't right. It isn't right to do this. Here, let's watch this video first, and then I'm going to comment on it.
Jews can't eat cheeseburgers due to a misunderstanding. I'm Elon Gilad. I write about Hebrew and Jewish history. Let me explain. The source of the prohibition on mixing dairy with meat comes from a single verse that appears twice in the Bible. Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk. The rabbis took this ban on cooking a goat in its mother's milk and extended it to all meat and dairy, even chicken, which doesn't even produce milk. But what if this isn't what the verse meant at all? When we look at the verse in Deuteronomy, it appears with other dietary laws, but in its earlier original appearance in Exodus, the context is completely different. It's among laws about bringing animals for sacrifice at the temple. So why would a cooking rule appear there? Here's the key. Hebrew is written without vowels, so we can't be certain about some words. The verb translated as seethe, tevashel, could just as easily be tafshil, meaning ripen or mature. This makes much more sense in context. What the verse actually meant was, when your she-goat gives birth, don't wait for the newborn to ripen on its mother's milk. Bring it to the temple right away. It's amazing that from this tiny misunderstanding, a whole set of dietary rules emerged, affecting millions for thousands of years. Now you know.
What's amazing is that your willingness to misinterpret. Let me explain a few very simple things. Number one is he states this verse, Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo. This verse actually is not written 2 times in the Torah. It's written 3 times in the Torah, which is very basic to most students of the Torah and the Talmud. Do a quick Google search and you'll see that. That doesn't refute anything. It's just an indication of a lack of information already. Number 2 is there's something called the written law and the oral law. This is very, very important to understand. The written law are the 5 books of Moses that God gave us. It's actually broader than that, but at the time that we were in the desert and going into the land of Israel, we have the 5 books of Moses as the written law. That's the Torah we take out in the synagogue. And then we were also given, that means God gave Moses, word for word, verbatim, the written law, the 5 books of Moses. And then God also gave Moses at Mount Sinai the oral law, which is an enormous amount of oral information, which was not written down, was just transmitted orally by mouth, which later on in history was written down because we were forgetting it. But at that originally it was not written down. And in the oral law, the way we know how to read the Torah, because there are no vowels, as he does accurately say. If you open up any Torah, you'll see there are no vowels, which then lends itself to being able to read many different words in the Torah, because this is the way Hebrew works, in many different ways, and really many verses would mean very different things if we didn't have the vowels. So how do we know what the Torah is telling us? Because God told Moses exactly how to read each word. In other words, the vowels for every single word. And that's why the Talmud tells us that the way we know that there is an oral law that was given with the written law is because otherwise we wouldn't know how to read the Torah, which means that just as the written Torah is from God, so is the oral Torah and the way to read every word from God. So the notion that we misread a word is completely false, number one, because that is part of information that God gave Moses. So it's divine. We know exactly how to read those words, number one. Number 2 is his suggestion that we're misreading the word tivashel and we should read it tavshil. He knows that when the word tavshil is spelled with a tough vet, shin, yud, and lamed. And the word in the Torah does not have a yud all 3 times. He knows that. I hope he knows that. If he doesn't know that, then this is speaking out of ignorance. So you cannot read the word tavshil, and that's the way it's meant to be read from the context. It's not. That's not the word that's written. There's no way that that can be read. So that's just a misunderstanding. And then lastly, what he says about mixing milk with meat or with chicken. Here's what we need to understand about rabbinic law. Rabbinic law is this. When God gave the Torah to Moses at Sinai and gave him the written law and the oral law, God also gave him special rules of derivation to derive information from the Torah. That you follow these types of rules of derivation, and anything you derive of the Torah following these rules are part of what I embedded in the Torah and is my divine will, part of what the written law is expressing. So much of what the rabbis teach us is not what they think, because we don't really care what they think about most things. Okay, we only care about using the principles of derivation and deriving information, which is always checked by many other rabbis, and we all know how Jews are. We're scrutinizing each other. So if it doesn't pass the scrutiny of all your other peers, then your form of derivation will not be accepted. If the rabbis there's a consensus of derivation of information from the Torah based only on the divine rules of derivation, that is part of God's instruction. So when God says, "Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk," I'm not sure why he used the word seethe, which is really doesn't sound like an accurate translation to me either. But do not cook a kid in its mother's milk, right? The Talmud demonstrates how we derive that this is not cooking milk and meat, as in beef. It is true. It is true that eating milk and chicken is only rabbinically prohibited, and the reason why is because that's not derived from the Torah. That was legislated by the rabbis, and that's a different form of rabbinic law, which is not derivation but legislation, where they legislate because people during that time clearly were associating chicken and meat, which I believe we still do today. So therefore, people, because they were able to, according to biblical law, you can eat milk with chicken. That was crossing back over to milk and meat. Therefore, they added to the prohibition of milk and meat not being eaten together to milk and chicken not being eaten together as well. Alon, I invite you to actually study Torah, take the time, and don't just share ideas that will make it interesting and trendy to say, "Oh, it was a big mistake, and we really can't eat cheeseburgers, God forbid." And I think you will learn a lot and really appreciate the Torah that you may not appreciate now when you study it on a very surface level, with a very surface level approach.